If we were to define American cities by one trait, then sprawl would be the ubiquitous answer. Houston, Atlanta, Los Angeles, and cities across the nation sprawl for miles, blanketing their local environments. Suburbs may embody the American dream, but beneath the idyllic surface lies a catastrophe waiting to happen. Spreading our cities out means that resources are used in a wasteful manner, one which could lead every city in the U.S. to resemble Detroit. In this video, I'm going to examine the three ways that our nation pays for sprawl: public, private, and external costs. Let's begin with public expenditure, and by public, I mean roads. Roads are built by the Federal Highway Administration, or FHWA, and this agency is funded by something called the gas tax. Set at 18 cents per gallon of gas, this tax essentially pays for road construction and maintenance. It was honestly a pretty fair system. Motorists pay for the roads they drive on. But in recent years, the FHWA ran into insolvency. Why? Well, many point out two trends. One, cars are more fuel efficient today, and two, that people are driving less. Both are true, but I don't believe it's the full story. If one looks at the amount of roads we are building, it's clear that this number is on the rise as well. Every city seemingly has some road expansion or addition under construction, whether it be 290 in Houston, Mopac in Austin, or I-70 in Denver. At the same time, costs for asphalt, concrete, and metal have been on the rise as well, resulting in more expensive roads. Today, a single mile of lane can cost between $1 to $9 million, and a highway interchange cashes in at $300 million. All this spells bad news for the FHWA and our supposedly self-sustaining system. In order to make up for the deficit in funding, the FHWA sucks money from the general tax revenue. For example, in 2014, that subsidy totaled $97 billion. It made up 41% of the FHWA's income and represents $600 of taxation to every household. But it doesn't stop there. In order to keep up with the rising road costs, the FHWA has partnered with private companies to try and cover the deficit. But how do these companies cover their road costs? Tolls. That's why every new road nowadays seems to be a toll road. The truth is, roads are resource intensive and expensive. As a result, the cars that use them cannot pay for the construction and maintenance of them. On top of taxes and tolls paid for roads, there are several private costs associated with cars. We each pay for a car, the fuel to drive it, maintenance, insurance bills, and accidents. The cost of all this is about $8,500 annually, or about 18% of the average American's income. And what do we get in return? An investment we rarely use. Cars are parked 95% of the time. When we drive them, only 4% of the usable energy moves the driver. The other 96% simply moves the car. And when one part breaks, the whole car is broken. Their delicacy is a major reason why new cars depreciate half of their value within 5 years. And just from a smart city perspective, forcing the masses to use cars to get around makes no sense. Why does everyone need to buy a private transportation vehicle when we could simply build our cities in a way that enables biking and walking? These forms of transportation take up virtually no space, are 100% energy efficient, don't spew pollutants in the air, keep us healthy, and are next to free compared to cars. As a society, we have focused on the most irrational way to move massive amounts of people, resulting in unnecessary spending. And this brings me to the third cost of car dependency: external costs. Since everyone uses a car, we inevitably choke each other out of road space, resulting in congestion. On average, we spend 42 hours a year fighting congestion. And in cities with more than 1 million people, that number jumps to 63 hours. The time and fuel lost to congestion totals to $960 per person every year, which is about the same amount of money as a lavish trip to Cancun. So how do we recuperate some of these costs? Through expanding highways, some say. However, this is not the correct answer. Wider highways reliably lead to the construction of more homes further downstream. In turn, more daily commuters enter the road space struggle until the highway ends up congested once more. This phenomenon has been documented repeatedly and is known as induced demand. It sheds light on the relationship between highways and congestion, namely, that congestion is part of the nature of highways. Sprawl separates homes, offices, and stores into zones that practically require one to own a car. If I lived behind this YMCA, I would still need to hop in my car and drive to it because the fences prevent me from walking. This sedentary lifestyle is unfit for humans and has negative health impacts. Sprawling areas statistically have higher rates of obesity, hypertension, cardiovascular disease, and diabetes. Unsurprisingly, more driving also results in more car accidents. Would you live in a sprawling suburb and risk your body? Oh, and let's not forget, healthcare is publicly funded. So even if you personally don't have health complications, you still pay for your neighbor's problems. By relying on cars for our transportation, we have also castrated the efficiency of mass transit systems. Today, many people think that rails and buses are a waste of public money. And, taken at face value, they have a point. Without high ridership, transit receives measly fare revenue and requires a substantial public subsidy. And from a resource perspective, unused buses are just bigger, more inefficient cars. However, those who are too poor or too old to drive still need transportation service to live. Simply put, cities need to set aside some money to fund buses and trains. Unfortunately, our sprawling cities actively prohibit transit efficiency, ultimately making it a tax burden. What really needs to happen is a densification of our cities so that transit no longer relies on subsidies to operate. All the parking lots, lawns, and one-story buildings that spread our cities out also affect other municipal services. To connect all our stores and homes, transportation departments need to build longer roads, which means a greater tax burden. Underground water and sewage lines grow longer as well, once again inducing a greater tax burden. Size indirectly affects fire, police, and waste disposal services by increasing the fuel and manpower these agencies need to do their jobs. As you can guess, this leads to a greater tax burden. Point is, sprawling cities cost more to maintain than denser cities. And how do governments raise revenue to pay for local roads, piping, and utilities? They use property taxes. However, low-density development is not a good income source. Let's take McDonald's as an example. At least in the States, this fast food behemoth builds single-story venues surrounded by parking spaces. Although McDonald's does pay tax revenue, the taxes it pays will be much smaller than what a 3-story building on the same plot can pay. This lack of taxable real estate chokes the municipal government's income, so much so that suburban tax dollars do not always cover the maintenance costs associated with the services. Chuck Marone from Strong Towns has done extensive research into this topic and calculated that dense, pre-war neighborhoods are subsidizing the infrastructure of newer suburbs around them. On a larger scale, the city of Detroit exhibits this phenomenon. Now, I know that the decline of Detroit can be attributed to many reasons, but I would argue that the city's infrastructure is a major contributing factor. You see, Detroit primarily consists of single-family homes and freeways. Gran Torino did a fantastic job portraying the city's suburban form, and images from Google Maps also reveal an endless suburban environment. As one can expect, the massive resource usage put incredible strain on municipal services. The education system is in shambles. There have been mass water shutoffs, and road infrastructure is crumbling. Low-density development made the city consume too many resources in an unsustainable fashion, leading to its bankruptcy. And the suburban infrastructure that couldn't hold Detroit up through tough times is the same infrastructure of nearly every other city in the US. Sprawl has increased highway spending to an unsustainable level, and they only exist because they are funded through tolls or tax hikes on the general public. In order to use this failing system, the general public also needs to pay the cost of car ownership, a private cost, which accounts for roughly 20% of household income. Once seen as a symbol of individual liberty, the car is now more aptly associated with a monetary burden. And our automobile reliance also contributes to obesity and stress, both of which result in very real health problems. Nobody wants to be overweight, but sprawl forces us into a lifestyle where we are going to feel the effects anyway. And the treatment for various health problems are not only paid for by individuals, but also by society, since healthcare is publicly funded. But you know what else is publicly funded? Mass transportation. Yet, our cities are built for private transport, not public, and as a result, our transit is underutilized. Or in other words, it is inefficient, and we pay greater taxes to keep empty buses running. And how can our cities pay for transit, healthcare, roads, piping, police, fire, and other services if all their revenue sources are choked? Well, the wealthy are the ones who are capable of funding sprawling cities, as they once did in Detroit. But once the rich move out, the system will crumble. Truth is, sprawling development is expensive and only viable because America is wealthy enough to pay for it. But it doesn't need to be this way. We could build our cities more densely. Walkability reduces the need for a car, ultimately providing a cheaper alternative. Density and walkability also facilitate strong mass transit systems, which are self-sustaining when built correctly. The ability to walk between destinations also shrinks our waistlines, our health problems, and our health spending. Finally, the skeleton of dense cities, roads, piping, and electric lines, reduces in size, ultimately reducing public costs. These cities are healthier, greener, and economically sustainable, and they should be the exemplar of urban planning in the 21st century.